Hey, what's up? I had this magazine for a while, and I just never got around to it. This is actually, it's not a, it's a overall cinema magazine, as you can see, retro, right? And I think it's a UK, another UK production. This covers, of course, all films, and this is quality. This is good. Most of the film magazines are basically left wing analysis rags that suck. This shows you there's enough stuff in the past to go back to. Is it sad? Is that the best days are behind us? It's what is. It doesn't It's irrelevant. Right? So, uh, and looking through this, it's like wow. It's always packed a lot of content. So to speak. They go over all different films, and genre films are they don't. I mean, war films and horror films and are big in these. Just going through. I guess I should read the editorial. I have not seen the editorial, but it's pretty decent. Obviously, nothing. I noticed too. There's no politics in this, other than the basic the revolutionary films of the '70s and civil rights. But it's just it's interesting too. One of the contributors here, this guy, this British photographer. I remember him. He would write articles and take a lot of photos for scary monsters back in the day. So I guess it's a step up. Guys that passed away, Andrew Prine. Now, I remember him from a lot of the horror stuff. Always played like a kind of. He was never quite the hero, but he wasn't always the villain either all the time. But I remember him a lot. Horror films: Barn of the Naked Dead, Crypt of the Living Dead, Grizzly, Simon King of the Witches. But uh, you forget how popular westerns were even into the '70s, and he was in a lot of these westerns, a lot of them. So, he debuted in Audie Murphy's "To Hell and Back." That's a great autobiography. If you ever read about Audie Murphy, that is a realistic World War II autobiography, and it's telling that it's right after the war, so narrative hasn't built up yet. Brutal book. So, of course, Henry Silva. Remember him? Look at that. My man with the MP 40. And Elizabeth Montgomery. Oh, they don't make them like this anymore. This guy. So many movies. Playing the heavy. With Ghost Dog. This is me going on. I'm having fun. I didn't know this. How come I didn't hear this from the horror mags? Okay, I'm talking about Fango and Rue Morgue. There's a Blu-ray. There is his live performances on his world tours. It's called Behind the Scenes. Now I had no idea this existed. Thank you, Fangoria. Thank you, Rue Morgue. Now I will look for it. Thank you, Cinema Retro. Yeah. And they got this funny too. Remember the submarine from what is it? For Your Eyes Only? Yeah. Apparently, there's a foundation that has all these blonde vehicles. I wonder if they get the car that turns into the submarine. It was looking back, Cinema 101. So you get all the '60s Mavericks, right? Just kind of a summary. Kurosawa, Fellini, Bergman, Pasolini. I don't like as much. But Sergio Leone, the Italians were well represented. Roman Polanski. You know what? Listen, the guy was talented. I mean, it doesn't. Fierce Vampires Killers was a brilliant film. So, Rosemary's Baby was good too. Just saying, of course, the Kubrick. I know a lot of people are like, I don't see what the big deal is, dude. But there's a reason. This is probably the best film director of all time. It's like, oh, come on. Definitely one of the best. Just going through here. Actor I'm not familiar with, but it's interesting. There was a film of this, a Krakatoa. This was I think the 19th century. This volcano went off. It was probably the most powerful explosion this planet's ever seen since the meteor that killed the dinosaurs. More than any nuke. I mean, people heard this from like thousands of miles away. You know. And also, apparently, he was in the movie Schizo. Like I said, I haven't seen these Peter Walker films. I'm remiss. Your old babe, Ursula Andress. Wow, Dr. No is 60 years old. Of course, the soundtrack's always right. You get look at The Devil Rides Out. I tell you, I love that movie. James Bernard. Look at the cool. I tell you, they do a lot of cool things with the vinyl now. So, and of course, you got your Jerry Anderson, um, the Thunderbirds, Stingray. I'm just kind of going through it. I'm not really going in depth or anything because I have nothing bad to say about it. The Omega Man. I haven't seen this movie in a long time. I'm a big fan of course, Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, but this movie was a trip, man. This movie was a trip. Basically, I Am Legend. Yeah, it's just right. There's the original, one of the best stories I've ever read. Top 10 horror stories, in my opinion. Really, just a lot of stuff in here. Remember the black woman that's his love interest. That she becomes one of the not really vampires. They're kind of like I don't know what they are. Yeah, right. It's Lisa, right? Her name was Lisa. She's come to the disease and gone over, right? And she turns white. I remember being freaked out by that as a kid. Yeah, and then of course the end. I mean, he goes out. He goes out like a man. So and try to help save the future of the people that aren't. I'm not familiar with her, but like I said, there's so much stuff in here. Of course, Terrence Fisher. This is a great article about. Terrence Fisher, the Hammer director, did a lot of the big heavy ones, the early ones as well, but very interesting. Very an example of a guy not appreciated by critics until after his death. And very a guy who seemed to be very he wasn't flamboyant. He wasn't didn't make a scene. He wanted to get the job done, right? He described him as the oldest clapper boy in the business when he joined the British film industry at age 28. And of course, the whole thing too is at one time the Hammer films were the not liked films by the critics. This book I have too, the Dennis Gifford book. I have that. Remember I showed that to you. And perhaps time will add its own patina to the Hammer horrors of today because it came out then, and the guy was right. It has. Okay. And the whole thing with him is he's not considered a flashy director. He doesn't have a particular style, as they say. Right? His style seems so understated, it's often hard to discern what it is from watching any individual film of his. It must be assessed over his body of work as a whole, yet it is quiet, understated technique that contrasts so potently with the blood-strewn imagery. Right? He inserts quite matter-of-factly. Exactly. You see, for the time, you see some of the craziest things. With Dracula, blood coming out of his mouth, or the Curse of Frankenstein, where you see like organs and eyeballs and blood, and it's just like, yeah, this is what's going on. Now, look how cool it was back in the day when they used to have it. Was this in the Haymarket in London when this opened in 1958? Can you imagine? Rest in peace, London. And going through, I mean, remember he did Revenge of Frankenstein too, great sequel. Curse of the Werewolf, the only werewolf movie he ever did. The Mummy. Now the writer here, he doesn't like The Mummy. He says The Mummy wasn't done well. I disagree. And what's interesting to me too, this is like Romero. George Romero is similar to this. Okay, he started out editing, right? So he began his career as an editor. Okay, so when you're an editor, it's kind of, I mean, you remember back in the day how they would edit film, right? You would have the two hand cranked reels, and you would have a viewfinder, and you had a razor blade or some cutting instrument, and you would cut them together. So with his editing background, it was very interesting. He knew how to shoot very economically. He knew exactly what was needed. He didn't do a lot of cover shots, pickup shots, extraneous shots. And that was very helpful because, of course, Hammer, we forget these films are very, very low budget. They look sumptuous. Right? I don't think I've ever used that word. They look so much more than the amount of money that was actually put into them. Frankenstein Created Woman. This is an underrated film. Probably the least seen Frankenstein film. This film is crazy. Yeah. Of course, they also go over the auteur concept of the director. Okay, to me, an auteur is a filmmaker that makes all the film himself, and you've had those. But as you can see, right, you're part of a team. I mean, look at the credits for any film back then. There's literally hundreds of people Maybe not on the Hammer films, maybe not on the old Universal films. There weren't a ton of credits. It wasn't a ton of people back then, but of course that has, the bigger the budget, the more people you get. Devil Rides Out. Another great film. He did that as well. Man. And they bring up one of the great scenes in Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed when they buried the body of one of the Frankenstein's victims, and there's a water pipe burst, even back in the day, and you see the arm coming out, and the water is moving the arm around like a puppet, and of course she's terrified because there's people all around trying to get in to see what the problem is, and she's trying to hide it. Anyway, just David Prowse. Man, that was a nasty movie. Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, very depressing. And that was him. The great Terence Fisher. Nice little respectful. Look at all the photos. Look at all the things. So we'll try to round this out. Make this one vid. Don Rickles. You watch any of his the roasts, the celebrity roasts from the 70s. Watch this dude. This dude was funny, man. And he was great. Like Kelly's Heroes, remember? He steps on the landmine, and he goes, "I stepped on a mine." And Telly Savalas is like, "What kind of mine is it?" With a smart ass look on his face, and he's like, "The type that blows up. How should I know?" Oh man, going through. Skip something. You got the Octagon. Remember that? The Octagon. And Dress to Kill. I tell you, it's funny. Dress to Kill is a film that you'd think they'd want to cancel it, but if you actually watch this film, it's an earlier subversive film. They're actually, if just watch the film if you haven't seen it. It's not what people would think today. And speaking of the longest day. This is one of the few, like the aforementioned Kelly's Heroes. You know yours truly's view on the war, always the war, right? But The Longest Day is one of the few films I can still watch. Right? The Bridge Too Far by the same writer. Kelly's Heroes I can still watch. I'm trying to think. The Eagle Has Landed, of course, and The Cross of Iron I watch for obvious reasons, but there's not a lot of them. But this one you can still watch because it is a pretty it's an even-handed account of what happened on that day. Obviously, there was a different narrative at the time in the early '60s, and they showed all the locations. Point du Hoc, all the scenes. Of course, the red buttons you get stuck up there with the bells, and you see it. It's funny too, right? Roddy McDowell's an English actor, but he played the American. Remember the guy? He's like, "Hey, Sarge, yeah, I got two of them, Sarge." And the Sarge is like dead next to him with a bullet in his head. Yeah, of course, the end, the brilliant. You can see I've seen this movie since I was a kid a lot. Oh, come on, what's his name? How can I forget? Richard Burton. He's like, he's put it together with safety pins. I do hope he comes back. The painkillers are starting to wear off. Right? Yeah, I mean, there were like a million actors in this film. Some showed up just for like a little bit, and some were featured through, right? And Theodore Roosevelt's son. Roosevelt is buried on the military cemetery at Omaha Beach, which is something I never understand. Not one American soldier's body should have been buried over there. What do you think is gonna happen in the future? Anyway, you should send them home, but whatever. And all the different scenes, of course, the infamous bitter, where shooting the Germans surrendering was a common thing seen in this film. So they talk about in the German version they changed it. I wonder what bitter means. In the German dub version, he would say, "I'm sorry, I caught on too late." Yeah, now we know they killed tons of German prisoners all the time. So, but anyway, I'm trying to think what other good scenes are in this. Historians have criticized it for its inaccuracy. Another great scene at the Point du Hoc. Remember, they friggin' the guys. I think was it Fabian? He's like, "Oh, we don't have to. That's like nothing. In training, we climbed the thing much higher than that." And they're like, "Yeah, they weren't shooting at us then." And they fight up there. They lose a whole bunch of guys. They take the thing to take the guns out, and then they go inside and they realize that the guns were never put in. And they're like, the guns weren't put in. And that one New York guy's like, "You mean we came all this way for nothing?" Yeah? And that's what you get from this movie, where all the nationalities speak their language. There's Barbara Shelley. Anyway, great magazine.